everyone. Welcome to Take 10. I'm your host, Kevin McMenamin with Loss Prevention Magazine. We're here today to speak with Raul Aguilar. Raul, we've actually spoke to you once before, and we're kind of coming back because sometimes 10 minutes just isn't enough, right? So we're gonna take another 10 with you.
Thank you. Glad to be back and to continue to spread the word on what HSI is doing in the interagency space against organized retail crime.
Excellent. Well, we're glad to have you, and we're very excited about what you guys are doing in this space. And I'm really looking forward to expanding a little bit on our first episode with you and talking first a little bit more about these the 4-pillar approach that you have at HSI, and maybe walk us through those 4 in a little more detail and some of the initiatives you've got going on each of these.
Sure. So I'll start with the public-private partnership like we talked about before. Any way and any chance we can to talk to public and private partnerships. So we do that through our Intellectual Property Rights Center, which deals with all the counterfeit goods. And we have retailers that work with day in and day out, all the big ones we could imagine, to protect against piracy and counterfeit goods. Banking consortiums, meetings with the banks to look at illicit finance, and meetings with them through our Cornerstone initiative, and any other ones that we get invited to based on conferences. If there's an opportunity to talk to the money service remitters, to private sector companies, to online marketplace companies, all the big ones you can imagine, all the platforms that sell stuff online, we're available to work with them and talk to them and deconflict to see if we can offer our services to help prevent these type of crimes to be on their marketplaces.
Excellent. And are you finding that, Raul? Are you finding that a lot of the products that you're finding stolen are showing up on those marketplaces?
Yeah, I think our research shows from working with Clear and working with these other interagency partners that you're finding third-party sellers going on these marketplaces. And obviously, there's an extreme amount of danger there when you can't verify products where they came from. There's a public safety issue there. If you're talking about, some of the strips for diabetes checks or baby formula that we see being stolen. Catalytic converters from vehicles, the smash and grabs from the Home Depots and those kind of power tools, how do you certify that those are safe to use? So we're seeing all those on online marketplaces as well.
Excellent. Now, and when you're solving some of these crimes, are these being prosecuted at a federal level?
Yeah, so we have some successful prosecutions. Particularly, we've had a couple in the Houston area. We've had some in New York. A couple others that are still in the developmental phases. We're trying to see if we can use other investigative platforms tied to these cases. So if there's a drug nexus, maybe through the OCDETF program, which is looking at narcotics trafficking at a larger scale to dismantle the bigger networks. If there's tied criminal networks to human smuggling, and there's some ties there, we can bring those back, like I said, to maybe our Central America team and look at those cases. If it's a straight up money case, then we'll work it with our financial groups. If it's a cyber case, we'll work it with the cyber team. Any way we can bring a prosecution, any way we can explain our authorities to the Department of Justice and or the state prosecutors, we will bring those cases and work together. And if it means joining forces with another agency to share the credit, we have no problem. We just want to work those cases and bring those criminals to justice.
That's excellent. And about how many cases do you think you guys have brought to the U.S. Attorney's Office?
Well, I can't tell you exactly how many we brought to the U.S. Attorney's Office, but I can tell you we've seen a double from 2020. The cases have doubled from the 2020 to 2021. So in excess of 40 cases are being worked across the country. Whether or not they've been accepted for prosecution, they're still in the works. But they're over 40, and I expect by the beginning of the year close to over 60.
Wow. And are you finding cooperation at that level and in the partnership with the U.S. attorneys when you're bringing cases to them? Are you finding that these are cases that they are willing to take action on? And
absolutely,
a challenge, obviously, in the retail world in trying to get, especially when we start talking about felony thresholds and some of these other, issues out there. But assuming that you're working on some of the bigger cases, you're finding that level of cooperation there with them?
Yeah, I think that's what we've seen with in talking to the field agents and the true experts that are working these cases across the country. We're looking at using any of our authorities to bring those cases to bear. So if it necessarily doesn't meet a threshold, maybe it's a case that can be worked over a couple of years, and then you're looking at a money laundering charge, a 1956, or you're looking at a tax fraud that maybe we do with the IRS, or maybe an international charge that can be brought to them for smuggling. So any way we can bring those charges to these criminal networks, that's what we're doing. And we're all finding receptive U.S. attorneys' offices. And if we find some that don't necessarily are taking those cases, then we spend more time in explaining our authorities and offering the interagency solution, right? Can we work this jointly with the FBI? Can we work it jointly with the IRS and some of these other federal partners that can maybe bring their authorities to bear?
That's fantastic. Now, the other authorities like that, when we're talking about investigations that deal more with, retail goods and things like that, are you seeing any hesitation with getting involved, or do you really feel that there's been a good partnership with? FBI has always been very strong for us, but you start looking at things like IRS and things like that. Are you finding it to be receptive to be able to look and I guess in some ways be creative in how we're approaching taking down some of these criminal networks?
Well, I've personally mentioned in various conferences and or settings here in DC where we have met with the interagency recently on money laundering initiatives through some NGOs and other banking consortium meetings, that ORC is a priority for HSI. And each one of those agencies has been very transparent with saying that just like anything else, there are priorities in their own organizations, but they're willing to sit down with our agents. We're connecting them at the field level because we can't prosecute from the headquarters side of the house. We're more of a programmatic team, but we do have connectivity to main DOJ. We have connectivity to our SAC offices in the field that if they need a connection to another agency, or maybe there's a state local case that's getting closer to the finish line, then maybe we can hold on that case and bring other charges if we tie them to a nexus overseas, or maybe it's on all of a sudden we realize it's on a marketplace and that case has a larger open net or dark net case that we're looking at from the cyber team. We could do that and then bring those together. And those agencies that I mentioned have been very receptive, and we work really well with them on all the investigative equities that we do. So.
Excellent. Now, this whole process is pretty comprehensive, and it's we start bringing in all those different types of options and opportunities and agencies. How are we getting that message out to, let's say in particular the retail community? Do you guys have any type of training? Do you have any type of any resources that are reaching out to make those connections and make sure that they're all aware of the resources that are available, and maybe even some training about ORC itself?
Yeah, so we recently attended the CLEAR conference, like we talked about, associations with anything to do with the retail association. We offer up through our SAC offices. We have engagements if they have, in particular, if there's several pharmacy type companies are sitting in New York and they want to get together at a one-day meeting, and we're offering up, whether or not we have an investigative case summary that we can go through from a historical case that's been prosecuted. We're willing to do that. We're talking to them about typologies and money laundering that we see in some of these cases. We're also reminding them that there's many different other centers of excellence that HSI uses to go after criminal networks, and to remind them that maybe if they're a particular company that's dealing with counterfeit goods and they also have an ORC problem, that make sure that their internal representatives that are working different threats are talking to each other, so we can work with them and bring them back to one single POC back in the domestic field office that's going to prosecute that case, right? So we see a lot of times that these big companies that deal with counterfeit goods are also dealing with the marketplace issue of marketplaces offering counterfeit goods, and at the same time they're offering stolen goods that are legitimate products but had just recently been stolen. And of course the huge markup that's being made because they didn't have to buy it, they get in there and they make that cut right away and on that third party online marketplace.
Excellent. All right, well, that's going to wrap up our 10 for today. But real quick before we go, how can folks get a hold of you and your team, or the resources that you guys have at HSI?
Yeah, so we have the website is ice.gov. And if you hit on the transnational organized crime section, you'll see a drop-down menu for all our initiatives and some of these centers of excellence that we talked about. But I'll just go ahead and mention the ICE tip line. It's a 24-hour, 24/7 intake center. And they'll process the tips and they'll forward them out to the SAC offices in the field, the 30 SAC offices and or the offices overseas. And I'll just give you the United States number. It's 866-347-2423. And then calling from international, 802-872-6199. And they can go on the ice.gov web form ICE tip line, and they can also do it through the web. So we appreciate any of those leads, and we'll go through them and we'll get them to the right team to look at them. And one thing I want to say is these cases are not done overnight. It takes collaborative effort. I want to stress that they can take sometimes up to years to do, and we're in for the fight. I've seen some of the recent cases that come out. They started out with just a stolen truck, a stolen, in some goods out of a place out of Houston, and it turns into a interstate organization that was moving money and shipping goods overseas. So be patient with us, but we're all in, and we're going to be working this with the interagency for many years to come.
That's great, Raul. Thank you very much. And thank you for all that you and your team are doing to help us in this effort to combat organized retail crime. So you've been listening to Take 10. This is an LPM podcast. I'm Kevin McMenamin, your host. We've been speaking to Raul Aguilar, who is the Deputy Assistant Director of Homeland Security Investigations. Raul, thank you so much. And we'll talk to you again soon. Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.